Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a small island nation surrounded by a restless sea. The wind moves through quiet villages. Wooden houses stand between mountains and rice fields. There are no factories. No railways. No tall buildings touching the sky. The people live as their ancestors lived, following traditions that are hundreds of years old. Now imagine that, in less than 50 years, this same nation builds modern cities, powerful industries, a strong army, and becomes one of the most respected countries in the world. How can a country change so quickly? How can an isolated island become a global power? This is the story of Japan's extraordinary transformation. For more than 200 years, Japan lived in isolation. Isolation means being separated from others. The country had very limited contact with the outside world. Foreigners were not allowed to enter freely. Japanese people were not allowed to leave. The leaders believed this was the best way to protect their culture and traditions. During this time, Japan was ruled by the Tokugawa shogunate. A shogun was a military leader who held real political power. The emperor existed, but he was mostly a symbol. Real decisions were made by the shogun and his government. Society was strict and organized. At the top were the samurai, the warrior class. Below them were farmers, then craftsmen, and at the bottom were merchants. Everyone had a place. Everyone had a role. Life was stable, but it was not changing. While Japan remained closed, the rest of the world was moving forward. In Europe and America, factories were rising. Steam engines were powering ships and trains. New weapons were being developed. Nations were building empires across Asia and Africa. Japan did not yet see the storm that was coming. Then, in the summer of 1853, everything changed. Large black ships appeared near the coast of Japan. They moved without sails, powered by steam. Smoke rose into the sky. These ships belonged to the United States Navy, led by Commodore Matthew Perry. For the Japanese people, it was a shocking sight. They had never seen such machines. The ships carried powerful cannons. The message was clear: the world had arrived at Japan's door. Perry brought a letter from the President of the United States. The letter asked Japan to open its ports for trade. It was not exactly a friendly request. It was a demand backed by military strength. Japan faced a painful choice. Remain closed and risk war, or open the country and face change. Inside Japan, leaders argued. Some said, we must fight. We must protect our traditions. Others said, if we do not learn from the West, we will be destroyed. Fear spread across the country. The old system suddenly looked weak. The shogunate had kept peace for centuries, but now it seemed unable to protect Japan from foreign pressure. In 1854, Japan signed a treaty with the United States. Soon, similar treaties were signed with other Western nations. These agreements were unequal. That means they favored the foreign countries more than Japan. Many Japanese people felt humiliated. They felt their country had been forced to bow. This anger began to grow. Young samurai, especially from regions like Satsuma and Choshu, started to question the shogunate's leadership. They believed Japan needed a new direction. They believed power should return to the emperor. At that time, the emperor was a young man named Mutsuhito. He would later be known as Emperor Meiji. Meiji means enlightened rule. His name would become a symbol of a new beginning. In 1868, after political conflict and brief fighting, the shogunate fell. Power was officially restored to the emperor. This event is known as the Meiji Restoration. But restoring the emperor was only the first step. The real challenge was much bigger. Japan's new leaders understood something important. If they wanted to survive in a world controlled by powerful Western nations, they had to become strong. Not slowly. Not carefully. But quickly. And so, Japan began one of the most ambitious modernization programs in history. The government sent students and officials to Europe and America. They studied everything: education systems, military organization, industry, science, and government structures. They observed factories. They visited schools. They learned how parliaments worked. They asked questions. They took notes. They brought knowledge back home. At the same time, foreign experts were invited to Japan. Engineers, teachers, military advisors, and scientists came to help build a new nation. Change came rapidly. The feudal system was abolished. Feudalism was a system where local lords controlled land and people. Samurai lost their special privileges. They were no longer allowed to carry swords in public. For many samurai, this was painful. Their identity had been taken away. Yet the government believed equality was necessary for national unity. A modern army was created. Instead of relying only on samurai, Japan introduced conscription. Conscription means that ordinary men were required to serve in the military. This created a national army, not just a warrior class. Education became a priority. Schools were built across the country. Boys and girls were encouraged to learn. Literacy rates increased. A population that could read and write was a population that could innovate. Railways were constructed. Telegraph lines connected cities. Factories produced textiles, ships, and weapons. The government invested heavily in industry. Later, many of these businesses were sold to private families, who built large industrial companies. Japan was changing not just on the surface, but at its core. However, modernization was not smooth. Farmers faced heavy taxes to support new projects. Some former samurai rebelled, unhappy with the loss of their status. The most famous rebellion was led by Seigo Takamori in 1877. It ended in defeat, marking the final end of the old samurai era. The message was clear: Japan would not return to the past. Instead, it would move forward, no matter the cost. Within a few decades, the results became visible. Japan defeated China in the First Sino-Japanese War in 1894. This victory shocked the world. An Asian nation had defeated a large regional power using modern military strategies. Even more surprising was what happened in 1905. Japan defeated Russia in the Russo-Japanese War. Russia was a major European empire. Many people believed an Asian country could never defeat a European power. But Japan did. The world began to see Japan differently. It was no longer a weak, isolated island. It was a rising power. In less than 50 years, Japan had transformed from a feudal society into a modern industrial nation with military strength and international influence. How was this possible? What gave Japan the ability to change so quickly while others struggled? That is where the deeper lesson of this story begins. Japan's transformation was not an accident. It was not luck. It was not magic. It was the result of clear vision, painful sacrifice, and a powerful national decision: adapt or disappear. When Japan opened its doors to the world, its leaders understood something many nations refused to accept. They understood that pride alone could not protect a country. Tradition alone could not defend it. In a world of steam engines and steel warships, a nation armed only with old swords would fall behind. But here is what made Japan different. Japan did not simply copy the West. It selected carefully. It observed. It studied. It asked, what makes these countries strong? Then it adopted those strengths while trying to protect its own identity. This balance between tradition and progress became the heart of modern Japan. The emperor became a symbol of unity. Even as political systems changed, loyalty to the emperor gave people a sense of stability. It connected the modern nation to its ancient roots. While railways were being built and factories were rising, Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples still stood quietly in towns and villages. The message was clear: Japan would modernize, but it would not forget who it was. Education played one of the most important roles in this transformation. The government introduced compulsory education. Compulsory means required by law. Children across the country were expected to attend school. They learned reading, writing, mathematics, and science. They also learned discipline and responsibility. Within a generation, Japan had one of the most educated populations in Asia. An educated population can adapt quickly. It can learn new skills. It can operate machines. It can manage businesses. Knowledge became a national weapon. Industry expanded rapidly. Textile factories were among the first major successes. Silk and cotton products were exported to foreign markets. Money flowed into the country. That money was reinvested into heavier industries such as shipbuilding and steel production. Cities began to grow. Tokyo, once called Edo, transformed into a modern capital. Gas lamps lit the streets. Newspapers circulated daily. Trains connected distant regions. Communication became faster. Movement became easier. Ideas traveled quickly. At the same time, the military continued to strengthen. The army was modeled after Germany's system. The navy was inspired by Britain's. Japan built modern battleships. It trained officers in advanced strategies. Discipline was strict. Loyalty was absolute. And then came the tests. Victory over China in 1895 brought Taiwan under Japanese control. It also brought confidence. Japan had proven it could compete regionally. Victory over Russia in 1905 brought something even greater, global recognition. For the first time in modern history, an Asian nation defeated a major European power in war. Across Asia, people watched with hope. If Japan could rise, perhaps others could too. However, success carries danger. With power came ambition. Japan began to believe it deserved a larger role in Asia. It wanted resources. It wanted influence. It wanted respect from Western nations that had once treated it as weak. This desire slowly grew into imperial expansion. Imperialism means extending a country's power by controlling other lands. Japan increased its presence in Korea and parts of China. In 1910, Korea was officially annexed, meaning it was made part of the Japanese Empire. At home, industry continued to expand. Large business groups known as zaibatsu dominated the economy. These were powerful family-controlled companies involved in banking, manufacturing, and trade. They helped Japan compete globally. By the early 20th century, Japan was no longer catching up. It had arrived. In just a few decades, the country had built factories, railways, schools, a constitution, a parliament, and a modern military. It had defeated powerful enemies. It had joined international agreements. It was treated as a serious global power. Yet this rapid rise came with pressure. Economic growth created inequality. Workers in factories often faced long hours and low pay. Rural farmers sometimes struggled under heavy taxes. Political tensions increased between those who supported democracy and those who favored military control. The same discipline that built strength could also silence disagreement. As the world moved toward the 1930s, global tensions increased. Economic depression spread after 1929. Many countries faced unemployment and poverty. In Japan, military leaders gained more influence. They argued that expansion was necessary for survival. This path eventually led to devastating conflict during the Second World War. Cities were destroyed. Lives were lost. In 1945, after atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan surrendered. The nation that had risen so quickly now lay in ruins. But here is something extraordinary. Japan had already learned how to rebuild. The same discipline, education, and unity that fueled the Meiji transformation would fuel recovery after the war. Factories were rebuilt. Technology advanced. Companies focused on quality and efficiency. Within a few decades, Japan became one of the largest economies in the world. Cars, electronics, cameras, and later computers and robotics carried the label, "Made in Japan," across the globe. Once again, the world watched in surprise. So what can we truly learn from Japan's rise in 50 years? First, change begins with awareness. Japan recognized its weakness when the black ships arrived. It did not deny reality for long. Second, education is power. By investing in schools and knowledge, Japan built a foundation stronger than any single leader. Third, unity matters. Despite internal conflict, the country moved with a shared purpose, national survival and strength. And finally, progress requires courage. The samurai gave up their swords. Old systems were dismantled. Painful sacrifices were made. Without those sacrifices, growth would have been impossible. Now, my friend, let us bring this story closer to you. Perhaps you are on your own journey of change. Perhaps you are learning English, step by step. Some days may feel slow. Some words may feel difficult. Sometimes you may wonder if progress is really happening. But think of Japan in 1853, standing before powerful ships, uncertain and afraid. Transformation does not happen in one day. It happens decision by decision. Lesson by lesson. Word by word. Japan chose to learn. It chose to adapt. It chose to grow stronger instead of remaining comfortable. And you are doing the same thing right now. Every story you listen to expands your understanding. Every new word adds to your strength. You may not see dramatic change overnight, but small improvements, repeated daily, create powerful results over time. 50 years transformed a nation. Imagine what consistent effort can do for you. Japan's story teaches us that identity and progress do not have to fight each other. You can honor your past while building your future. You can respect where you come from while still moving forward. Change can feel uncomfortable. Growth can feel demanding. But history shows us that courage and learning can reshape destiny. Thank you for taking this journey through time. Thank you for learning, reflecting, and growing. Now I would love to hear from you. What part of Japan's transformation inspired you the most? And what change are you working toward in your own life? Keep learning. Keep moving forward. Your transformation is already in progress.